الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه سميع بصير. My respected friends, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is always wonderful to come to warm Newcastle despite the weather. The people are much warmer, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting us and for putting up an incredible event, not just in numbers, but the warmth and the sincerity and the solidarity and the humanity that you show. I think something we should all espouse towards and try and make sure that we can spread it around in our country. If more people like more people in Newcastle, it would be a better place in Britain, believe you me. My friends, I want you to take you on a journey, not a very pleasant journey, unfortunately, but I want you to imagine something as you are coming here today from your different respected homes. Most of you, I'm sure, have driven here. But just think for a second that every building you're passing by, every house, every office, every school, college, university, and also hospitals had been obliterated, totally demolished. You were fearful of bombs being dropped on you. You could smell burning timber and concrete. You could also smell burning flesh. As you looked around, not only were you aware that over 30,000 of your fellow brothers and sisters have been killed, martyred, but how many more are lying under that rubble is beyond your comprehension. If you can imagine that dystopia and horror, then you have maybe only come halfway to what is happening in Gaza. Because in Newcastle, there are approximately 150 properties. Whereas in Gaza, according to the United Nations, in the last 4 months, Israel has destroyed 320,000 dwellings. At one stage, the BBC and the Western leaders were questioning and asking us that how can we even contemplate Israel could have bombed a hospital. Remember those days 3 months ago? Well, today, over 36 hospitals, each and every hospital in Gaza has been bombed and destroyed by Israel. Nobody speaks about it. And that is the horror that displaces us, creates discomfort amongst us, and some even anger. And we need, as people of faith, of people of solidarity, people of justice, we need to divert that sense of fear, if you like, the sense of hatred almost sometimes, and sense of loss into positiveness. And that is our responsibility, because if we are to think that Israel, through its might, the relentless bombing over the past 4 months, the indiscriminate killing, the systematic targeting of people and buildings in Gaza, if they thought that they would be successful by sheer force, then people like you have proven them wrong, that we'll be coming out week in and week out, day in and day out, and month in and month out, until Palestinians are free and there is a ceasefire in Gaza. And that is the moral responsibility we have. How do we change our anger? How do we change our loss of faith in the system? How do we bring humanity together and change the situation on the ground? Because while the people in Gaza are suffering more than any other people at the moment around the world, and this suffering is taking place not because of some natural disaster, but because another set of set of human beings have decided to carry out that massacre upon them. How do we change that is our responsibility. And it is a responsibility that bears very heavily upon us. But we also need to make sure that while this is happening in Gaza, we unfortunately live in a country that it is our government that is making that possible. And that, of course, brings a greater responsibility upon us, that we living in Britain have a responsibility to ensure that our government does not continue with its blanket, unreserved support for Israel and its genocide of the people of Gaza. As speaker after speaker have mentioned, that this did not start on October 7th. In fact, Britain is not only implicated in the present genocide, but it's implicated in the very suffering of the Palestinian people. If it was on for our country right from the turn of the last century, we would have not had the problems that we face today. But we've also realized that while the crisis is being unfolded in the people of Gaza and the catastrophe they are facing, we in Britain are also polarizing our society. There's a two-tier system that is emerging in Britain, in which those who call for justice, who call for peace, and who call for equality are being undermined by the very structure of the so-called civilized world, or the heart of the metropolitan civilized society. Because today in Britain, when Netanyahu says he will colonize everything from the river to the sea, our Prime Minister sends him arms and tells him, hope he wins. Yet when we call for freedom and justice and equality from the river to the sea, we are somehow portrayed as hate mongers. That may be mere words at the moment, but that carries on and has deep roots that are fracturing the society. Just this week, an individual working for the University of Leeds went to Israel, picked up the arms, and participated in the genocide in Gaza. He came back this week and has reinstated in the University of Leeds. And the BBC ran a story, and I quote, "The rabbi is being threatened or is receiving threat mails because he has come back to the University of Leeds." In this country, you have the right, it seems, legally, to go to Palestine, pick up arms, and kill the Palestinians if you support the Israelis. Somehow, if you want to stop that genocide and call for freedom, call for equality, you are a troublemaker and potentially committing a crime. And that is our responsibility to change. And it's our responsibility to bring about that change. Because when we change the system here, things will also change in Palestine. Because this is an arc that emerges from Washington, Tel Aviv, and London. Tel Aviv is not working in isolation. It has the full backing of the Western-centric governments as well, including the Arab neighboring states as well. They're all in this together. There is a Western-centric order that wants to see that the world should be ruled a certain way. So in a way, the Palestinians and people in Gaza are an example of the forefront of the resistance of what the world order wants to strive towards. So to work for the Palestinians, so when we say we are all Palestinians, metaphorically, what we are saying, in effect, is that we do not want to be subjugated and to be ruled in a way that the Western-centric order wants the world to be ruled. My friends, this also means we have to carry on with our work. And that work means providing support to each other. It means to be able to give hope, because that hope is what will sustain us and provide us with success. Because no power in the past has given justice on a plate to the occupied people. Neither will justice and freedom and peace descend from the skies. That justice and peace will have to be fought for. And it will be the fighting has to take place here in the streets of London, in Britain. What I mean by fighting is fighting economically, making sure not our single penny goes to support those that are occupying Palestinians, and we boycott everything that emerges from Israel. A time is coming, my friend, listen to me carefully, a time is coming when civil disobedience is the way forward, when our government now is also trying to legislate against, at the moment, only institute to not boycott Israel, but that will come to civil society as well. We should counter that. If it is required, if it is necessary, we should take to the streets. We should learn from the African Americans how they rose up for the civil society, how they brought about the inaction and to break down the laws of apartheid and racism in America. In America, when the Africans were not allowed to be with the white people and stand in the same buses with the white people, the African Americans, they took a tremendous step forward. And they, first and foremost, not only tried to break that embargo, but they also made sure that the taxi drivers at the time also went on strike so that nobody could use them. Here was a double loss, a loss of income, where the very people who were oppressed, so they could not earn a living. But that sacrifice that they had to give meant today they're more equal than they were in the past. I'm not saying they're all equal even today, but they're more equal. And that is the path we'll have to take. We will have to pay prices. We will have to struggle. We will have to make sure that the luxuries that we have taken for granted can be sacrificed. It is only through that sacrifice can we bring about peace and justice around the world. Because the genesis, the root cause of the problems, unfortunately, emerges from the superpowers of the time. That is United States of America, and within Europe, it's Britain, our country. And for that, we need to take to the streets. There is a possibility, and this is the sad news I have to give you, that as organizers of national demonstrations, we are feeling the heat tremendously. It is possible we are likely to be banned demonstrating. And if they do ban us, I want you to come out more in our numbers and make sure we break their laws until there is peace and justice. I have all the hope that any individual can get from just looking from the different peoples that we've addressed over the past 4 months. We have traveled up and down the country, from Scotland to Wales and right across England. And hundreds of people come out, and hundreds and thousands of people together gather week in, week out in cities. And we are unanimous. We are in the majority. Remember that carefully, my friends. We are the majority, not only on the right side, but we are the majority in this country who wants to see peace, who wants to see justice, and who wants to see free Palestine. It is the minority who have to start listening to us to make sure that they mandate what we want. And let's use that at the election time. We make sure that we take control of our democracy. Take control of our democracy. And those who did not vote for the ceasefire, we simply say to them, no ceasefire, no vote. No ceasefire, no vote. And we should also raise the bar and say, no respect for international law, no vote. Those who do not accept the ICJ ruling that Israel is plausibly causing a genocide should not be voted in. And this is not only for the Palestinians, this is for us as well. How can we have political leaders? How can we have political leaders who will legislate, bring about laws when they themselves cannot accept and appreciate and practice the laws they want us to practice? This is a hypocrisy of the highest order, and we need to change those dynamics. We need to work in unison. And as I mentioned to you earlier, there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people in Britain who are willing to join hands with us. We need to go out there, demonstrate, campaign, politically lobby, make sure the media is challenged. Don't just go quietly about it and complain amongst ourselves. Complain to them and make sure we use social media efficiently to bring about a change. We can unitedly bring about that change. And together we are a force to be reckoned with. and not let anybody tell you otherwise. Because in the past we have seen when people gather together, when they unite, black and white, young and old, people of faith and no faith, there's nothing that will be able to stop them. And we are that tsunami that's bringing about peace in this country and around the globe. Finally, my friends, the situation on the ground is very dire. When we have the little story of Hind we've just heard, when that kind of things are allowed to happen, then not only are the Palestinians being dehumanized, but everybody else along with them are also being dehumanized. As in, how can we allow that to happen? And therefore, the clock is ticking, and we need to increase our efforts. I know that it has been going on for 4 months, but if the Israelis cannot get tired of killing, then we must not get tired of trying to stop that killing, and I am sure you will join me for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate, the national demo, there is a stop the war story back there, and the main man is Mr. Tony Jeremy. We ourselves have been to 4 or 5 of these national demos, and I do strongly recommend that you go and stand on the right side of history with hundreds of thousands of people. It comes highly recommended. Moving on. Up next, we have Abdel Malek, Palestinian Forum for Britain representative, friend and brother. Originally from Hala, PalesTyne, Abdel has spent most of his life in Jordan, and this is simply due to displacement. I'll stop there and hand over. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening. On behalf of the Palestinian Forum Britain, we thank you for coming tonight. We are all here with hope. Hope that genocide will finish soon. Hope that relief for people in Gaza and the reconstruction of Gaza will begin soon. It should be begin now in a huge scale. And hope for Palestine to be free. In the past few weeks, I have been thinking a lot about one question: what more do we need to do, and how can we do more effective in helping Palestinians and people in Gaza? Well, I will try to give part of the answer. One of the things is imagination. Mick Bowman, who will speak today, said in his speech yesterday in Newcastle demo, he couldn't imagine that when he set off for his trip to Palestine, that he would spend that time in West Bank helping Palestinians systematically, ethnically cleansed from their homes and lands while we are witnessing the war's genocide. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn imagined when he got arrested in 1984 in front of the embassy of South Africa that after 10 years, the apartheid system will end. I don't imagine that Dr. Ismail imagined when he established 27 years ago the Friend of Aqsa organization that he will have this amount of people working with them and this team of volunteers doing such events. Me personally, I think all of those are truly Palestinians, and they have the imagination of justice for Palestine. This is why they spend most of their lives fighting for the oppressed, working towards peace and justice, and sticking to their principles, trying to make real change no matter what. So I think everyone here feels the responsibility about doing something for Palestine. We know that people chanting Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. But how did people imagine how Palestinians will be free? We should imagine how that looks like and work harder to achieve that. So no matter where you are, you can do something, whether it's small help or even a big project idea. So please, if you have any ideas, contact any organization working towards Palestine, Friend of Aqsa, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Palestine Forum in Britain, and offer your help for them. I will end with this. Call me crazy, but I see free Palestine will come soon. And we will see the likes of Netanyahu and the war criminals behind the bars serving justice. And every person complicit with enabling this genocide will be facing consequences. So now allow me to introduce Mick Bowman. He's a former councillor, trade unionist. He set up his trip last year from the River Tyne to the Dead Sea to highlight and promote the Palestinian cause. And he did that to extend his long solidarity with Palestine. So please join me, welcome him to the stage.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you very much. Comrades, brothers, sisters, I'd like to say a big thank you to Friends of Al-Aqsa, Newcastle Friends of Al-Aqsa, for organising this event this evening and inviting me to talk about the situation in the West Bank. And in doing so, it's not to detract from or dilute fantastic campaigning, activism, direct action which everyone is showing in connection with the barbaric genocide that is happening in Gaza. But it's so we can extend our solidarity to the Palestinians in the West Bank and also in East Jerusalem who are experiencing a slow genocide. 57 years of brutal occupation have meant that apartheid structures have been put in place. Theft of land, ethnic cleansing, theft of water resources, killings of innocent civilians, including children. The controls of everybody's life means that people are experiencing a slow genocide. Now, I've seen that in this firsthand. I had the privilege of spending 4.5 months in the West Bank. Just returned, I left the West Bank less than a week ago on Monday last week, and just returned to Newcastle a few days ago, so I'm still trying to get being here. When I was there, there was an organisation called the ISM, which is the International Solidarity Movement. Now, this is a Palestinian-led organisation which was formed during the Second Intifada, 20 years ago. It stands in solidarity, practical solidarity with Palestinians in their struggle in unarmed resistance against brutal occupation. We do two things to express this solidarity, show our support. One is to witness and document what is happening, to get the information out to the wider world about the brutal occupation that is happening in the West Bank, and the war crimes which are happening there on a daily basis. But also, secondly, is to try and provide a protective presence to individuals and communities in their struggle against violent settlers, against the Israeli occupation forces. And that means physically being standing alongside communities, alongside villages. So I was there for 4.5 months. How did I come to be in the West Bank? Well, I went by a rather unusual route, in the sense that I walked there. I left the northeast, started off from Calais in April 2023. It's a long time ago now. The idea of doing this walk came from reading a book called Walking to Jerusalem, just by a guy called Justin Butcher. Written in 2018, it documented a walk by a group of Palestinian activists who are part of the Amos Trust.
who walked in 2017. That date is important because that's the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, which is a particularly perfidious piece of example of British imperialism, and would lay the basis for the subsequent dispossession and displacement and expulsion of Palestinian people from the lands that we've seen ever since. So they walked, following the route, pilgrimages going via Francigena across Europe, most of Europe, and then an old Roman road going via Asia, going through the Balkans and into Istanbul. So I like that idea. I've always been active for the Palestinian cause. But the idea, there's something in that which really clear, the idea of long distance walking is activism, of a political pilgrimage. So it's still the seed for it, and then when I retired from work the year before last, I had time to do it. So I set up from Calais. I've been doing some work with other comrades who are here tonight at the camp base for Calais. And it's about raising awareness about the Palestinian cause, but also about the cause and rights of refugees as well. The walk took me across nine countries. There's a total of, I think it's about 1,800 miles. Originally I thought it was over 2,000, but there was a period when I was in Greece when the severe forest fires went into the part of Greece which was off balance, so reduced the mileage a little bit. So I walked about 1,800 miles. It took me 5 months. I was backpacking, so I was intense and I was coming back, so I was doing it on a tight budget. I deliberately made a decision not to seek any funding, or do any crowdfunding or anything like that, because I thought that would detract from the purpose of the walk. So it took me 5 months. I reached Istanbul, and after, I think by and large along the way, I didn't experience any hostility. I was wearing a Palestinian flag on the back of my rucksack for most of the way. And if anything, it attracted curiosity. And that curiosity very often turned into solidarity and support. And there was one occasion in particular when I was in northern Italy, in a town called Reggio Emilia. Was invited to an event which had already been arranged to present a documentary which took Italian filmmakers that live in the South Hebron Hills. And they'd also been painted a huge mural on one of the village walls there. I saw that, I was really particularly impressed by it. And I actually ended up staying at the house in the village with that mural on the wall. That was quite powerful when I first saw that. I mean, when I set off in the middle of April, I knew that the situation in the West Bank was terrible and was deteriorating. At the end of 2022, we had the election of the far-right government, in which the fascist and Jewish supremacist elements were embedded. The settlers were, in fact, in power now in Israel. We had the likes of Ben Gvir, an illegal settler, convicted criminal, convicted of hate crimes against Arab people, who is now the Minister of Security. You wouldn't believe it. And also another guy called Smotrich, also an illegal settler, convicted criminal for hate crimes, is now the Minister for Finance. Smotrich actually lives in the settlement of Jubal, the centre of Ramallah. These people are also committed to a concept called Eretz Israel, which means they don't accept that Israel should just be confined within the borders as defined by the 1947 resolution, or even by the 1949 Green Line. To them, Israel encompasses all of historical Palestine, but it also goes beyond that to Jordan, to southern Lebanon, to southern Syria, and also parts of Egypt. And that should be a pure Jewish state. All Palestinians don't have a place in there. So they're committed to that, and these people are now in the heart of government. So by the time, as a result of those extreme policies which are now government being enacted, over the course of the first 9 months of 2023 last year, before the 7th of October, over 200 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, and over 50 of them were children. Land theft by legal settlers, it escalated. Building of settlers, it escalated. So the situation was far early, but obviously it deteriorated markedly, both for the people of Gaza and also for the people in the Palestinians in the West Bank following events of the 7th of October. Since the 7th of October, now about 400 Palestinians have been killed, murdered, by the Israeli occupation forces and settlers. And of that number, nearly 100 are children. There have been 1,500 people forcibly displaced due to the activities of violent settlers, and 15 villages have been forced to evacuate across the West Bank. I think there's, in addition to that, there's also 6,000 people who have been, suffered severe injuries as a result of being shot by the Israeli occupation forces. And when I was in Bethlehem, I was visiting a colleague down at the Haitian refugee camp, and he took me to a hospital in Bethlehem, and that was to see some of the young people from the Haitian camp who'd been injured by during one of the many frequent raids into the refugee camp. Four young people who now got life-changing disabilities as a consequence of being shot for another crime, being under Palestinians. We must remember that the Palestinian Authority doesn't have resources, and there's a barely functioning health authority, there's no social security system for those people who've got lifelong disabilities and dependency. And that's behind those stories, behind each of those 6,000 statistics. Just highlight maybe three main elements of what the occupation and what the slow genocide actually means in the West Bank. Firstly, as I touched on, is ethnic cleansing. Most of the time when I was in the South Bank, I was in an area called the South Hebron Hills. I know that some people here have actually been to that area. It's in the southern part of the West Bank, and it's a spectacularly beautiful area. Made up of small, marginally isolated rural communities for a very traditional way of life, based on shepherding, herds of goats and sheep. A way of life that they've carried on for decades and decades, if not centuries. But it's an area where it's falls within Area C of the West Bank, which is under full Israeli control, and this is where all of the settlements are concentrated. So they've been subject to a violent program of ethnic cleansing by the activities of terrorist gangs armed illegal settlers. When after the 7th of October, Ben-Gvir, the security minister, he allocated 20,000 assault rifles, so battlefield MI6 weapons, to the illegal settlers, so that they could enforce their occupation. And many of these settlers were also called up to work as the army in that area as well. So after the 7th of October, they were given free rein to carry out ethnic cleansing. And this wasn't just a random act, this was a systematic program carried out at the behest of full knowledge and support of the Israeli state. And maybe just what this looks like, I just want to say a little bit about one particular village, the village of Tuwani in the South Hebron Hills, which is where I was based for most of my time there. And then so just looking in the space of 1 week, this is 1 week in the middle of October, a series of events happens which I think epitomise what life is like for people living in the West Bank, especially in the South Hebron Hills at this time. On Friday the 13th of October, outside the small mosque in the village, an illegal settler from the Havat settlement, from which settlers have been terrorising the population for the past 18 years, came down into the village, which is about 300 metres away, with an assault rifle and with a soldier from the IOF in tow, apparently with the intention of massacring all the people who pray in the mosque. The people in the mosque had actually come out a bit earlier, and he was confronted by one of the young guys who approached him. This guy was then shot in the stomach by the settler, shot in the stomach using a dum-dum bullet, which lacerated basically all of his insides. He survived. He's only just very recently, within the past couple of weeks, been discharged from hospital, but he's going to have lifelong disability. Now, when this happened, the IOF soldier took out, pointed his gun at the other worshippers in the village. He was protecting this settler who just perpetrated this attempted murder. That was on the Friday. A couple of days later, a bulldozer appeared, driven by a settler from the illegal settlement, at the back of the land of the Harani family in whose guest house we were staying, and with the presence of 4 or 5 soldiers, started bulldozing land, olive trees, and the vegetable garden behind the house of the Harani family. I was with a group of Israeli activists, and we approached to try and film what was going on. We pushed back at gunpoint. When the bulldozer had finished, we approached the site to try and get a better picture, and suddenly the settler with 3 or 4 army in tow started firing shots, so we better hastily retreat. Within a couple of days of that, there were a number of raids at one of the houses in the village, brutal raids, in which this was during the night. Family members were terrorised, children traumatised, a huge amount of vandalism and destruction done, solely for the purpose of intimidation and terrorising. And there was also there's a phenomenon in the South Yvonne Fields in the Jordan Valley known as settler herders. And these are illegal settlers who have flocks of goats and sheep, and they use those to claim territory. So when I was there, one of the guys from the village was shepherding his flock. The settlers came with their flocks with the army in tow, pushed them off the land, and it's a method they used to claim control over whole hillsides and also steal livestock. And I think there's been about 10% of the land, Palestinian land, in area seized by Israel in the past 5 years. Secondly, there's been a war on the refugee camps. This doesn't get reported over here at all. The refugee camps in places like Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarm, Hebron, Tubas, they've been centres of resistance to the occupation going back decades and been targeted by the Israeli military because of this. It was been subject to frequent raids. People most likely remember the Al Jazeera journalist, Shireen Al-Akleh, who was murdered by an Israeli sniper. This was in Jenin refugee camp two years ago. I went to visit one of these Jenin refugee camp because we heard from comrades in Freedom Theatre, which people may know of in Jenin refugee camp. That place had been ransacked and vandalised by the army who'd been in the refugee camp for 2 days. So we went just as the army were pulling out, and I've never seen levels of devastation like it. They use these huge armoured bulldozers to go in, and in the process of doing that, they rip up the roads, they rip up all the underlying sewage and water infrastructure, they take down house walls. Houses were damaged by artillery fire. There have been 11 people killed over the course of the invasion by 1,400 soldiers. 11 people killed. Military personnel in hospitals were targeted as well. And this is being replicated day in, day out across the West Bank. Almost like many Gazas in these areas. And I think the genuine fear of many Palestinians is that once Israel is finished with Gaza, they're going to move into the West Bank. Finally, just say a bit about the arrest and detention, which is one of the main tools which Israel uses to stifle down on any dissent, any opposition to the West Bank. Since the 7th of October, there's been 6,500 people who have been arrested and are now in detention. The majority of them are held under what's called administrative detention, which is a process by which an army commander can say, yes, this person has to be in prison for 6 months. There's no judicial review of that, there's no formal charges, there's no court hearing, it's all done on the basis of a secret file, which neither the defendant nor his lawyer have access to. And those 6 months periods can be renewed indefinitely, so people can end up being in prison for many years. The conditions in prisons have grossly deteriorated since the 7th of October during the imposition of emergency regulations under the direction of Ben-Gvir. So all the normal norms which apply to overcrowding, to decent food, medication, checks by the Red Cross have all been suspended. Amnesty International did a report in November which showed that true torture is being routinely used. People are beaten from the moment of arrest, and that continues throughout their detention in prison. 260 people of those 6,500 people arrested are children. And also, over the course of the past 3 months, it's now eight detainees have died as a result of torture experienced in prison. So the situation in the West Bank is shocking. It is deteriorating, and I think it does amount to some genocide. So I think in our solidarity that we're showing quite rightly with the terrible situation in Gaza, the genocide that's happening in Gaza, we need to find time as well to support our Palestinian comrades in the West Bank. And I'll just end on two quick points. Firstly, a day of reckoning will come for Israel. It will come. Whether it's through the ICJ or through the ICC or through Israel being treated as the rogue pariah state, which it is, a day of reckoning will come. But it will also come to those organizations, those individuals who've actively colluded with and enabled the genocide to happen. Talking about the armaments factories, such as here in Newcastle. We have an armaments factory on Scottswood Road. It will also come for those banks and those institutions which have funded the genocide and enabled it to happen. And it will also be a day of reckoning, just following on from what Yvonne said earlier, about how the war's been reported by the mainstream media, including the BBC in this country, where the Palestinian voice hasn't been heard, and where the only narrative is the Israeli one. A day of reckoning will come for them as well. And just a final point, it's just about the value of the international solidarity that we show, the outpourings, the visible outpourings in the rallies, the marches, the vigils, the die-ins, the sit-ins. It's hugely important. And not just because of the building momentum to pressurise those who have power and make decisions which affect foreign policy and which affect support for Palestine, but very importantly, what it means to the Palestinians themselves. I know that when I was in the West Bank, I used to share the videos and photos of comrades in Newcastle and all the actions you were taking here. People would actively look at social media and see where the demonstrations were happening, what size the demonstrations were, and that was a huge source of support for people. A real visible manifestation of solidarity, which means a lot. It shows people that in those situations of oppression that they're not alone. They don't need validation for their actions. They know that they are right, but it just helps to solidify that. So keep up those expressions of solidarity. I know at times the situation is overwhelming, and you maybe sometimes question whether it is of value, but it really is of value. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mick. A lot of us here from Newcastle, we anticipated Mick's return. Maybe one of them, it's the first time I managed to see him there. So there's lots of catching up to do, Mick, and wanting to hear the full version of his story at some point. Thank you very much and welcome home. Up next, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Hala Hanina up to the stage. She is a women's rights and political activist from Gaza City. Her parents were refugees since the 1948 Nakba. Hala was in Gaza prior to the 7th of October when she came to England just days before the current conflict commenced. Sadly, leaving behind family, friends, and her husband and loved ones. Thank you, Hala.
Hello. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for making this effort coming here and also for making this event at this time when many people are losing hope and interest and televised genocide that's still happening as hard and as brutal as it was before, but unfortunately some people are not anymore interested. Although it's been more than 4 months now, Israel is still as dedicated as ever in spreading the genocidal campaign against Palestinians in all Palestine, specifically in Gaza. Rafah invasion shouldn't happen. It's brutal, it's scary. 2 million people who refugees there are in a very small portion of land, 55 kilometers. And they're so scared. However, it's not only Rafah. All genocidal actions should stop from all Gaza Strip, the 5 governorates, and also from all Palestine immediately. So thank you for keeping your hard work, and please keep it as much as you can, because we need it more than ever. Thank you for standing with and support for justice, humanity, while supporting Palestinians. Specifically, my dear panels, who have gone through so many hurdles in standing with Palestinians and Palestine. Today is the 128th day of this current Israeli genocidal campaign against my people in Gaza. Today, I stand before you bearing the heavy burden of being a genocide survivor. I lived in Gaza to witness all other 6 genocidal campaigns, where Israel killed more than 7,000 Palestinians in Gaza only since 2008. So this is nothing new. This is the first genocidal campaign for me to be outside Gaza. only left a few days before it had started, with a silly hope to reach the UK on time to be able to teach in my university. I came a week earlier than my husband, who is still stuck there. To be away from my family, everyone I love and care about, within a genocide is such unfortunate. Although the amount of suffering we are all enduring, I'm still holding a faith for my people's justice and their right of freedom and the right of witnessing accountability for the genocidal Israeli crimes. That up to my father's words have made the life of 5 generations of us miserable and unbearable. Every part of me is a testimony to the cruelty of the Israeli genocide over Gaza. Everything on me is related to others. My black shirt is from Jabalia camp that hosts the highest population in the world, 100,000 people in a camp, where my husband was born and a place I spent many days in. It's also a place where the Israeli occupation army scarred the camp by 2 of the deadliest massacres in Gaza, killing more than 700 people in 2 attacks only, leaving the camp unrecognizable anymore. Looking at my necklace reminds me of my mentor, Hanan's cake, the beautiful angelic woman that I first met in 2012 Israeli aggression over Gaza. We both were volunteering in hospitals and shelters, helping people, children, to be happier, spreading gifts, aid, and whatever we could give to them. Hanadi is the woman who I later knew that she co-founded the Safety House in Gaza, a place where battered women and young girls are kept safe, providing them with care, love, warmth, and integration in the community. The woman who raised her youngest son, my colleague, Dr. Azzuddin, my first degree dentistry, to be now a model of a student doctor who volunteers in hospitals since the beginning of this genocide, notwithstanding the tragedy by the Israeli tanks, but never leaving his position to provide patients with the best care he could provide. Hannah Speck, the woman who always provided safe shelter for women and girls in Gaza, wasn't herself safe. Israel bombarded her home and killed her beloved husband, her son Huzaifa, and his pregnant wife Rana, and their young little daughter, 3-year-old Reem, and many others. My mentor Hanadi was pulled from underneath the rubble, severely injured but alive, hoping for a never-given treatment in Gaza, where there is no hospital undamaged by the Israeli occupation. Standing here in the UK reminds me of my dear friend Maisara Reyes, an extraordinary doctor who was the youngest winning Chevening Scholar among us in 2019 scholarship leaders, whom Israel killed and separated him from our dear friend and Chevening alumnus also, Laura. Israel killed Maisara and 7 members of his family in one hut at their home. 2 of his brothers survived this hut and kept trying to break his and their family's body from underneath the rubble, hoping that they might have survived this. 3 days, and they tried to retrieve the bodies by their own hands. However, on the 3rd day, on the 8th of November, Israel targeted both brothers, killing them immediately. His brothers wanted to rescue Maisara, who had one biggest fear inside this genocide, which was to stay underneath the rubble. Unfortunately, Maisara is still underneath the rubble for 3 months now. Another thing that Maisara had was after this genocide. How could he go a little bit away from his wife Laura, who he got married to 5 months ago? Unfortunately, he was willing to be away for hours. Israel told him, leaving Laura alone forever. Looking at my face is the face of a strong woman who always fought for justice. Is now a face of loss and loneliness, of being left to the most documented genocidal campaign against my people, yet the most denied by politicians and media. My loss is not even comparable to Aadam a 6-year-old child. I saw an interview of him yesterday. He was eating a cracker while saying that he was in the living room with his mom. Suddenly, the Israeli occupation forces bombed the main door, then the home door. When the IDF entered, he said, I hid in my room. Then they executed my mom and dad. He said, Aadam, executed. Why would a 6-year-old child know this word? Then Israeli forces threw a bomb at us, and I was injured by shrapnel. Aadam witnessed the murder of his parents in front of his eyes and also 6 family members. His little brother Faisal survived with serious injuries sustained by the grenade thrown at them. Today and every day, I stand so no people ever will face what we are still facing today. Today I stand so this shall end, and never repeat it, not for everyone and not for us. Those are 128 days with more than 35,000 of our beloved people killed in this small period of time. I am only one example who had 10 minutes to mention a few of many I know and lost. Imagine listening to all my stories, or all the 2.3 million stories. Remember, the UK is totally responsible for everything happening in Palestine. From here it started, and from here it shall end. All this had legitimacy in 1917 when UK issued Balfour Declaration, and is still going with their continuous investment and shameless support of Israeli latent genocides. Call the UK to stand for their responsibility for creating Israeli colony and supporting 75 years of Israeli settler colonialism, genocide, and our statelessness. We had a tortured, appalling, multi-generational life because those Western countries, those choose villain leaders colonizing the world. The people of colonizing countries have a responsibility and must choose better leaders. Leaders who would seize their colonial investments. Leaders who would rectify their historical and modern mistakes and would never do them again. I know you have a decent leader. I know you have decent leaders. I met some of them today. So just to choose them, the price on my people is literally our lives. I call the UK to rectify their colonial crimes starting from the end of genocide, end of occupation, support for Palestinians' rights of self-determination and freedom. This genocide, if ever ended, will be repeated soon and more cruel, as always. This would not end unless all settler colonial occupation have a real immediate end. Ceasefire now in the occupation.
probably wondering when Jeremy Corbyn's coming up to speak. Oh, right, oh, okay. Without further ado, then let me make my introduction at least, and then we'll take it from there. So I came across a quote that I would like to share with you. Each and every one of us have a part to play in ensuring change, and we must continue to do everything we can do to bring about a kinder and fairer world. By the strength of our own common endeavour, we achieve more than we achieve alone, and we do it for the many, not for the few. As you know, Jeremy Corbyn is a British politician who served as leader of the opposition and leader of the Labour Party from 2015 to 2020. On the political left of the Labour Party, Jeremy describes himself as a socialist. Jeremy has been Member of Parliament of Islington North since 1983, and as of October 2020, Jeremy sits in the House of Commons as an independent, which I believe may be the best place to be for right now. So without further ado, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight and the fantastic organisation that's gone into this event. And this will be a night that I'm sure every single person here will remember because of the way it's been presented, the messages we've had, and the determination of the Palestinian people. There are many in this audience who are from Palestine, either recently come or some time ago and grown up here. All of them are feeling the pain of lost relatives, lost friends, lost family, and then every day watching on our television screens in real time, live television, homes being destroyed, people being killed, and armoured cars and all the rest of it rolling in, and airstrikes as well. There's a friend of mine, is a Palestinian man, he's an optician, he's got a place in my constituency. And I was just walking by one day, and I thought I'll just pop in and see how he is. And he's there at his desk working away with the computer on, doing prescriptions and things. And he's got tears running down his face because at the corner of the computer screen, he's got Al Jazeera on all the time, just seeing his homes, his friends, and his country being destroyed by weapons supplied from the West, destroying the very fabric of life there. And so we've got to understand the horror of what is going on. There are now 30,000 dead, at least. If we went to one funeral per day of each child that has so far been killed in Gaza, just one funeral for each day, it would take us 27 years if we went to a funeral every day to get through that number of funerals for all the children that have been killed in Gaza since the onslaught started in October. 1 million people now around Rafah, and Netanyahu announces there's going to be a bombardment of them, and they've got to go. The plan, I assume, is to drive all the Palestinians out of Gaza into the Sinai and create another Gaza Strip in the Sinai in exactly the same way the 700,000 were driven out of what is now Israel in 1948, mainly into Gaza, but not exclusively. And then some politicians seem to rather belatedly decided that things have gone too far. And they've said there's too many people being killed, it's gone too far. What on earth do they mean? where has their humanity left them? 30,000 is too many. Does that mean 20,000 is all right, or 10,000 is okay, or 5,000 is fine? No! It's all wrong. All the killing, all the Palestinians. And after the awful events of October the 7th, Antonio Guterres said, and he got very much criticized for it, he said, this didn't all come from nowhere. He was right. The occupation has gone on ever since the Nakba took place, in reality. At various times it's been more intense than others, and of late it has been incredibly intense. And I want to pay a big tribute and thanks to Mick Bowman for walking all the way there and for the work he's done over the last few months, practically helping people in the Hebron Hills whose homes have been destroyed by the violence of the settlers against the villagers of the West Bank. And they're being supplied, the settlers that is, with assault rifles in order to attack villages and drive people out to extend the settlements. There are now more than 500,000 people settled on the West Bank. The best land, the best water, the wells, the food supplies, the olive trees, and all the rest is taken over by settlers. And the West and the rest of the world has basically condoned this. They keep on richly saying the settlements must stop, but don't practically do anything about it. So in all our discussions, let's not also forget what's going on the West Bank. And also, if I may say so, because it doesn't often get mentioned, is the situation facing the refugees in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, and the huge Palestinian diaspora around the world. It's been my privilege and honor to visit many refugee camps of Palestinian people in different places. And you talk to older people in those camps. I've never forgotten going there in Lebanon, the camps in Lebanon at Shalima camp, and I was there with the late Sir Gerald Kaufman, who was a Jewish member of Parliament and was very proud that he was a Jewish member of Parliament, but also spoke out in support of the Palestinian people. And he and I went to visit this refugee camp, and we were talking to this elderly man who was sitting between us in his home. And I asked him a question and said, what was your village like that you came from? And he left this village in 1948, and he described it in the most excruciating detail. Every house, every tree, every farm, everything about that village. And then he just turned to me and said, do you think it's still there? No, of course it's not there. It's gone. It's been destroyed, like so much of his life had been destroyed. And his whole life had been living in the refugee camp, dreaming of the day of returning. Now, Resolution 242 of the UN did, in fact, include the right of return. And I want you all to think tonight of the horror of what's going on in Gaza, of the horror that's happening to the people on the West Bank, and the sadness of those people that are in the refugee camps at the present time. But I also want you to think of the strength of the Palestinian people and the strength of people that express solidarity to them. Because when we took the case to the International Court of Justice, over 300 very prominent academic and legal people in Israel also signed the application to take their government to court for committing acts of genocide against the people of Palestine. We're in this together in solidarity to try and bring about that justice. But in all this, sometimes the voice of Palestinian people gets equated with a sort of plaintive cry for help from desperate people. Well, yes, of course the Palestinian people are requesting and demanding help, and they're quite right to be doing that. But I also want you to try and understand the historic strength, the cultural strength, the literature, the art, the music, and all the things that are part of Palestine. And I have recently produced, with Len McCluskey, a poetry book called Poetry for the Many, a selection of poems from all around the world. And the idea is to encourage people to understand and enjoy reading poetry. And we've got one poem in this book called In Jerusalem by Mahmoud Darwish, who died in 2008. Mahmoud was a very famous Palestinian poet. He was born in what is now Israel. He then left there, went to Lebanon and came back, and then left again, went to Moscow, went to other places, and then came back into, I think, Lebanon in the late 1970s. And he wrote this poem, which I'm not going to read it all because it's too long for the purposes of tonight. But in 1974, he wrote this poem in Jerusalem after he had been banned from ever going to Jerusalem. And it's a description of a sort of flight of the mind as he's walking through Jerusalem. And he's trying to think about the history of Jerusalem, the Palestinian people, and what Jerusalem means to people, not just in Palestine, but all over the world. And the last few lines of it are this. I'll just read this bit. I don't walk, I fly. I become another transfigured. No place and no time. So who am I? I am number one in the Ascension's presence. But I think to myself, alone, the Prophet Muhammad spoke classical Arabic. And then what? Then what? A woman soldier shouted. Is that you again? Didn't I kill you? I said, you killed me. And I forgot, like you, to die. I was thinking about this poem and so much about the culture and the strength and the fortitude of the Palestinian people when I was invited by the South African delegation to join them at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And it was an amazing occasion. It's a beautiful building. It's obviously the highest court in the world, and a very small number of us were allowed in as observers to see the proceedings. We had to get there very early in the morning and all that. And then I watched the presentation by the South Africans, and it was totally brilliantly presented, brilliantly argued, brilliant case, quoting the Genocide Convention, quoting the statements by Netanyahu, quoting all the other statements, which constitute an act of genocide. It's not a simple issue, it's an issue of an attack on a people because they are a people. That is essentially the main articles of the Genocide Convention. And the interim hearing came out, which asked that the world recognize that the act committed by Israel have to stop, because they have to stop continuing genocidal acts against the Palestinian people. I want to say thank you to the people and government of South Africa for throwing off the shackles of apartheid. Throwing off the shackles of apartheid. And as Nelson Mandela himself said, the freedom of the people of South Africa will not be complete until the Palestinian people also enjoy their freedom. And the support that is given to the application by a number of governments around the world, as well as the Arab League. The support was given by the governments of Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, and then many others that have done that, and other cases that have now been referred to the International Court of Justice. But two big things have happened since then. One is that in response to allegations where evidence is yet to be produced of misdemeanors by staff of the UN Relief and Works Agency, the United States announced it would stop all funding. 12 other governments have done exactly the same all around the world, including the British government. And the UN Relief and Works Agency has lost one third of its income in one fell swoop. Now, I've met many people that work for UNRWA. I've visited their places. I've been 9 times in Palestine over my life. And I admire the work they do. They've always been stressed. They've always been stretched. They've never had enough money. They've always just trying to survive, to continue giving the needs to the people. That income has now been cut by 1/3. Some governments have increased their funding to try and stave it off, Brazil particularly, and others have stepped up and said, we'll give more money to compensate for the money that the US, Britain, and other governments are not giving. But then you ask yourself, what is in the mind of somebody that recognizes the one agency that has fed, helped, educated, and kept in reasonable health the Palestinian people at this very moment when the disaster is there in Gaza, has its funds cut? It's an act of horror against some of the most desperate people in the world to deny them medicines and food. Are they seriously saying that it's okay for Palestinian children to have to be operated on in an operating theatre with no anaesthetic, no clean water, nothing else, just the skill and love of a surgeon or a doctor trying to help them through, when a few kilometres away, there's all the anaesthetics in the world, there's all the clean water in the world, there's all the things that you need for sustainable life, deliberately starving and destroying the lives of the Palestinian people. And those governments that have cut money from UNRWA, including the British government, are complicit in the deaths of Palestinian people because of it. And of course, the other area where complicity takes hold is that of the weapons. Where are they coming from? Where are they coming from? There are F-16 planes, there are tanks, there are armored cars, there are all kinds of surveillance equipment, there's all kinds of weaponry being used by the Israeli Defense Force in destroying every building in Gaza. It seems to be their intention. They're coming from the United States, they're coming from Britain, they're coming from France, they're coming from Europe as a whole, they're coming from Canada, all kinds of places they're coming from. And so those governments that continue to supply weapons to Israel, knowing that they're going to be used against an unarmed civilian population in Gaza, are also in defiance of the International Court of Justice, are also susceptible to legal action in their own countries, and are also susceptible to action being taken in the International Criminal Court. Now, a court of itself doesn't bring about a solution to the whole issue. Obviously, it doesn't. But it takes away the legitimacy of the argument about the occupation. It takes away the legitimacy of the oppression of the Palestinian people. It gives all of us, all over the world, who are arguing in support of the Palestinian people, extra strength, extra hope, and extra opportunities to get that message across. And so we have to continue all the pressures that we do and all the demands that we have to make on politicians and everybody else. I've been in Parliament a long time, and I've been at pretty well every debate there's ever been on Palestine and the Middle East, and I tell you, I've heard all the arguments there ever are to hear. And when the issue of the ceasefire vote came up, and it was actually on a Scottish National Party motion that it came up, I signed the motion that the Scottish National Party had put forward, and it was debated, and then it was eventually voted on. I heard the most utterly cynical comments going on in the tea room and in the corridors and so on. MPs who represent substantial numbers of people who are deeply concerned about Palestine, sort of saying, well, if we abstain, nobody will notice, we can sort of get away with it and leave it to the SNP and those others to do it. They're thinking nobody's noticing. Well, this time a lot of people did notice. They noticed those that voted in support of the demand for a ceasefire. They noticed those that voted against it, and they noticed those that couldn't do anything and just abstained and missed out on the whole point of it. The function of a member of parliament is to hold the government to account. The function of a member of parliament is to speak up for peace, for justice, and for humanity. They failed to do it that way. So, our campaign goes on, and I know how frustrating it is. I've been on all of the national demonstrations and many more besides that. I've done lots of meetings and rallies all over the country, and I've raised the issues in the European Council of Europe as well in Strasbourg. I know it's frustrating, but Mick will confirm, and I'm sure all the Palestinian people here will confirm. Frustrating as it is to march around our streets and have rallies and meetings and so on, it does two things. It gives support and comfort to the Palestinian people who live here, but it also gives hope to the people in Palestine that realise they're not alone, that there are people with them, there are people supporting them, and that we are not going to go away. But it also has another function, and that other function is it brings us all together. Look around you. Look at our room tonight. Look at the work that's been put into this. My great friend Ismail has put a huge amount of work into this and other events that we've been doing together around the country. And it's brought together people from different groups, Palestine Solidarity, Friends of Al-Aqsa, Stop the War Coalition, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and lots of other people. When I'm walking around my constituency, I come across people that I know vaguely, sort of on nodding terms, hello, I've seen you before, kind of thing. And these are people that are not necessarily very political, never ever raised a question of anything international with me ever before, just coming up to me on the street saying, Jeremy, please do something to bring about a ceasefire to stop the carnage that's going on in Gaza. So our message is getting through. And so the political classes that think they can maneuver their way around this and use fancy language about there's enough killing going on already, they're missing the point that the revulsion of ordinary people around this country about what they see to be going on in Gaza and the treatment of the Palestinian people. And it brings us all together from all of our communities, black, white, Asian, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, everybody comes together. We are also a movement that utterly and totally condemns racism in any form whatsoever in our society or anywhere else. And so this movement doesn't stop here. This movement becomes one that is demanding peace and justice on the world stage, that does demand we don't spend 2.5% or going on to 3% of our gross national product on arms. Instead, we start looking at the issues that the world's faced with: environmental disaster, inequality, war and hunger, and also the hunger and inequality and injustice that exists within our own society. So the eyes of so many people have been opened by this campaign. So I finish with this, and I urge you all: mobilize all of our communities to come out in even larger numbers for the demonstration, the next national demonstration, which is next weekend, and all the other demonstrations that we have. And in that, all those people that come out will learn something. They'll learn something of humanity, something of solidarity, something of the good that is there in human beings to try to stand up against the inhumanity and the vileness that's going on at the moment in Gaza. I don't want to be watching television day after day, just seeing more and more destroyed buildings, homes gone, and bodies lying in the road until there's a brief lull in the fighting and then somebody tries to bury them. I don't want to see pictures of children who've lost all of their family, aimlessly wandering around, trying to find some food or find some water, or the horror stories of doctors performing amputations without anaesthetic. We can do better than that as humanity. We can do better than that to stop this fighting. So it's cease fire now. Support the Kingdom of Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you so much. Mick and Jeremy, if I could just ask you to come and join me here on the stage. Don't look so surprised we didn't tell you about this, but if you'd like to come and join me. I would also like to invite Palestinian Sister Suha and Sister Noor on stage. They're going to say a few words and present the gentleman with something. Don't be shy, come over here. It's something nice. If you stand here, the lady. Come on up, sister. Say something. All right, Sister Suha is gonna.
Remember, Mick walked the whole way
I
there.
know, bless him. Can my son speak instead of me?
I'll speak on behalf of my mom. Hello everyone, my name is Omar Oukasha. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, everyone here from PalesTyne. We're from PalesTyne. Free PalesTyne! So my mom has prepared this handmade culture-based art that she has made by her own hands. I'm very proud to be the son of a Palestinian woman doing such beautiful art. This will be a token to you, Mr. Jeremy. Thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you so much for supporting Palestine. Free Palestine!
Along with Mr. Jeremy, I would like to thank Dr. Ismail and Mick as well for all the hard efforts they have put and continue to put throughout their lives for the cause of Palestine and defending our people's rights to live and liberation. These gifts, which been made by the hands of Palestinian women, are a very small expression of appreciation for all their great efforts and being great models we are proud to follow. Thank you so much.
The lovely Palestinian sisters also have a gift for Dr. Ismail Patel. I'll take that and make sure I'll pass it on because he's not with us. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, ladies. So we have one more speaker this evening, and we've left the most important one to last, of course. We have Brother Omar Oukasha. And I'm going to tell you, he's pretty popular in the crowd here. Omar is an architecture student. In his own words, he is born and bred in Newcastle, a real Geordie. Ethnically Palestinian from Gaza. Most recently, Omar visited his family and loved ones in the past summer, so just the summer of 2023. He will, this evening, be sharing with us a poem about his late grandfather. Omar, if you wouldn't mind coming up, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. So today I'm just planning on reading a poem for you guys about my grandfather. Before that, I have to give you all the context. So please just listen in. And let's talk about my grandfather. My grandfather, Mohammed Yunus Oukasha, my mother's father, and a father of 12, was born in the Nakba of 1948. During that crisis, they weren't able to document his birthday, so we didn't know his birthday. But when the month had passed, we just knew he was a year older. My grandfather was very small, an architect and a constructor, meaning he would design and construct the buildings himself. I remember going to my grandmother, on my father's side, and then she would mention to me, yes, he was very small, because they knew each other in high school, and he would be awarded and labeled as smart due to his debating skills and math skills. And then I'd bring that news back home to my grandfather, and then he'd order, he'd say, yes, of course I was. He was labeled one of the most cleverest students of his time. And he had no filter on. I remember sitting on his bed talking to him, and he'd draw on paper his new architectural plans. And on his bed, with no ruler, yet his lines were so straight, and in an instant he would make any maths calculations that he needed. And his skills were very admirable to me. And then I showed him my uni work from first year, and I mentioned he has no filter, so he absolutely rinsed me. But that only motivated me to go back to uni and, do more with the knowledge that he's taught me. And then the relationship of my grandmother and grandfather was very strange. Some would liken them to, Tom and Jerry. One moment complaining about each other, and another moment not letting anyone else complain about them in their own company. My grandmother would act like she didn't care about him, always in a sulk, but would still make his favorite dishes and made sure he slept on his full stomach. And once we went out to the beach, he obviously couldn't come with us because he's immobile. That's a fact that I had to mention. He's immobile, he couldn't walk. When he would go to the bathroom, he would go one hand on his walking stick, the other hand holding onto a wall or whatever, then to the bathroom and back to his bed. And that was the case for the last 5 years. And so he was immobile. And then we'd tell our grandmother, okay, what about you? Come on, just one night. And she would say, no. And we would, she can complain all day about my grandfather. We know she loved him because she wouldn't leave him alone, not even for a split second. And then he was reaching old age, and he had that hearing loss. He'd drive my grandmother mental, blasting the music from his TV, watching a show I recommended, Orthogal, if you remember that. And trust me, if you go into his room and come back out, you feel like you have new sound cancelling headphones. And then you get used to shouting at him so he hears you. So then I go and communicate to my cousins. They're like, why are you shouting? I'm like, oh, sorry. You get so used to it. He was practically bedridden. And then, near the start of this Nakba, when they warned the people to go from the north to the south, that fake warning where they still bombed people making their way, doing as they got told, and then still bombing the south heavily anyways. My grandfather decided to stay firm in his house, the same house he had designed and built, and the same house he had for over 40 years, the house his kids were nurtured and grew up in the same house he had his comfort in. And he wasn't about to leave that comfort, and even if he wanted to, he felt he couldn't. Being an immobile, fragile man, he didn't want to be a burden on any of my family. He told them to leave him on his bed, and with that, after trying so long to convince him, they had left. And at the start, my grandmother also remained, until 10 days later, they saw that, she was getting affected by this. So they were just trying to save as many people as they could. They did. My cousins literally, her grandkids, forced her out. And then my cousins would, after this, go every few days to check up on them. Check up on him. But on the 21st of December, he went up north, and on his way of getting closer to our street, he saw bodies massacred, scattered everywhere on the ground, people coming out to recognize their loved ones, and in front of our doorstep lied my grandfather's lifeless body in the cold, with a dried up bullet wound to his forehead, found without any slippers on, nor his walking stick. So from that, it was evident that the Israeli Defense Force had dragged him out of his comfort of his own bed. They couldn't even give him the comfort of executing him on his own bed. They had to drag him outside, aiming with full intent their weapon at an elder, fragile, crippled man, and ending him. We didn't know when he died. The last time my cousin visited was around a week earlier, so no one knows how long he stayed on the cold streets of his home for. So my grandfather, he had no birth date or death date. But I just want to mention, he also didn't just die a physical death. In his final moments, he died in many different ways. One from grief. His last sister, my mother's aunt, Zainab, was his last sister to remain. She was killed along with the entirety of her descendants. A whole family, her kids and her grandkids wiped within seconds. He died from loneliness and fear, having to bear the weight. He died of starvation, no accessibility to food or water in his last days. Who was going to bring that forward? And finally, his physical death. My grandfather's crime was that he remained intact in the same house he built, in which he was so brutally murdered. And he did not deserve this. This is only just one of the stories that are coming out from Gaza, and I just wanted to mention it because at the start, we heard them names of who it was, but then it gradually became numbers. Then the numbers, whether we like it or not, it makes it less impactful. Because imagine a names filling out on a page. Obviously, they wouldn't fit on a page now, but one number will, and it won't take a line. And then this venue, it's not even 1,000, so imagine the 30,000. We don't really feel that. And with that all being said, I've prepared a poem that I'd like to read about my grandfather and his last days. In Nakba's embrace, a child arrived, birth obscured by time, born on a moving carriage, tears, a silent, lonely ride. First glance into the shadows, an early burden to bear, fragile cries echoed, a tale of loneliness laid bare. From the cradle to the drafting table, you forged your path, architect of dreams, straight lines a life built to last, designing your haven, a refuge from the storm, planting seeds of hope in the soil where dreams were born. As the sands of time swept, wrinkles etched your face, from efficient design to an old man's grace, bearing witness to turmoil, remaining in the home you knew. Streets echoed with gunfire, skies painted in hues askew. Dragging your crippled body from the comfort of your warm bed, the same place we talked for hours, stowing upon me knowledge from the life of the dead. Dragged outside, seeking refuge in the night, laid on the ground at an unknown hour, out of sight. A shot rang out, a cruel twist of fate, a bullet wound to your head, an emblem of hate. Cries echoed once more, not of design but of despair, loneliness, hunger, thirst, and the weight of loss you had to bear. Tears dried, hopes extinguished, like the stars in the sky. Palestinian soil stained as a valiant soul said goodbye. Wrapped in red, a cloth marked by strife, beneath the shade of the tree you planted in life. Muhammad Yunus Oukasha, 75 years of Palestinians' annexation, 75 years in which you experienced not 1 year of freedom. From one Nakba to the other, rest now, O grandfather, in the arms of peace, your story etched in the echoes that will never cease.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Omar. Up next, I'd like to invite Imam Ali Asad onto the stage. He's going to share a closing dua with us.
You can all just put our hands and thoughts together and pray for the Palestinians. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Salatu wassalamu ala al-Anbiya al-Mursaleen. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Oh Allah, please accept our gathering here today. And Allah, you promised that a gathering that is in your remembrance is accepted. Forgive us all here today. And we ask you today in unison to show Palestine freedom once again. We ask you to give freedom to the people of Palestine. We ask you to uplift the genocide, uplift the oppression, and bring down your justice swiftly. May your justice come swiftly upon those oppressors of the people of Palestine and all those who are suffering around the world today. Accept our prayers like the way you accept the prayers of your righteous believers, the prophets, and those who are the pious predecessors who have passed before us. And accept our duas in your presence. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that leaves me with the thank yous in closing. I would like to say a massive heartfelt thank you to all the speakers and presenters that joined us this evening, as well as the venue, our wonderful FOA event volunteers. In particular, shout out goes to Shannon, Taj, Sarah, and the children who helped with the pre-production. Thank you. And of course, the audience for coming and joining us this evening. Thank you very much. The last thing that I would leave you on is a quote from Desmond Tutu, the South African theologian. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. Thank you and good night, everyone.
PalesTyne.